Well, welcome to the first episode of Wormwood Wednesdays here on Into the Wardrobe. Now, this is something new we're trying this year, and I'm so excited about it. I know you will be too when I get to tell you more about it. What we're going to be doing is on the second and fourth Wednesdays of every month, we're going to read from C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. Now, if you're not familiar with the book, it's a very famous book that Lewis wrote. It serves as an instruction guide to Christians, but it's also written from the perspective of, believe it or not, demons. It's a series of letters from Uncle Screwtape to his nephew Wormwood. And in these letters, Screwtape is instructing Wormwood on how to bring about the destruction of a British man known only as the Patient. Now, just as a bit of background, this book was actually dedicated to C.S. Lewis's good friend J.R.R. Tolkien of course, Lord of the Rings fame. And it was actually written during the Second World War. But you will be so surprised as we read through it at how relevant so much of what we read is to us today. Now, the book is 31 chapters long, and we're going to read 2 chapters a month. So this will take us well into next year, or if you're lucky, we might do some bonus episodes this year to get through it. Now, one of the questions you may be asking is, why are we doing this? Why are we taking the time out of this channel in 2025 to read some letters from one demon to the next? Well, I'll tell you the answer. I believe that right now it is essential for us to understand that there is an enemy and he is out to attack us in any way that he can. And we need to know his playbook, maybe now more than ever. So this year in 2025 or 2026, whenever you're tuning into this, I want to encourage you to take the time to tune in to Wormwood Wednesdays and learn how you can survive attacks and how you can even prosper in the face of the attacks from the enemy. And after we read each week, I want to hear from you. I want you to take the time in the comments section to challenge and encourage each other, to share how you think that what we just read applies to the world that we live in today. So let's go ahead and get started. I have no intention of explaining how the correspondence which I now offer to the public fell into my hands. There are 2 equal and opposite errors to which our race can fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence. The other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. They themselves are equally pleased by both errors and hail a materialist or a magician with the same delight. The sort of script which is used in this book can be very easily obtained by anyone who has once learned the knack. But ill-disposed or excitable people who might make a bad use of it shall not learn it from me. Readers are advised to remember that the devil is a liar. Not everything that Screwtape says should be assumed to be true, even from his own angle. I have made no attempt to identify any of the human beings mentioned in the letters, but I think it very unlikely that the portraits, say of Father Spike or the patient's mother, are wholly just. There is wishful thinking in hell as well as on earth. In conclusion, I ought to add that no effort has been made to clear up the chronology of the letters. Number 17 appears to have been composed before rationing became serious. But in general, this diabolical method of dating seems to bear no relation to the terrestrial time, and I have not attempted to reproduce it. The history of the European war, except in so far as it happens now and then to impinge upon the spiritual condition of one human being, was obviously of no interest to Screwtape. C.S. Lewis, Magdalen College, July 5th, 1941. Chapter 1. My dear Wormwood, I know what you say about guiding your patient's reading and taking care that he sees a good deal of his materialist friend. But are you not being a trifle naive? It sounds as if you suppose that argument was the way to keep him out of the enemy's clutches. That might have been so if he had lived a few centuries earlier. At that time, the humans still knew pretty well when a thing was proved and when it was not. And if it was proved, they really believed it. They still connected thinking with doing and were prepared to alter their way of life as the result of a chain of reasoning. But what with the daily press, radio, television, and other such weapons, we have largely altered that. Your man has been accustomed, ever since he was a boy, to have a dozen incompatible philosophies dancing about together inside his head. He doesn't think of doctrines as primarily true or false, but as academic, practical, outworn or contemporary, conventional or ruthless. Jargon, not argument, is your best ally in keeping him from the church. Don't waste time trying to make him think that materialism is true. Make him think it is strong or stark or courageous, that it is the philosophy of the future. That's the sort of thing he cares about. The trouble about argument is that it moves the whole struggle onto the enemy's own ground. He can argue too, whereas in really practical propaganda of the kind I am suggesting, he has been shown for centuries to be greatly the inferior of our Father below. By the very act of arguing, you awake the patient's reason, and once it is awake, who can foresee the result? Even if a particular train of thought can be twisted so as to end in our favor, you will find that you have been strengthening in your patient the fatal habit of attending to the universal issues and withdrawing his attention from the streams of immediate sense experiences. Your business is to fix his attention on that stream. Teach him to call it real life, and don't let him ask what he means by real. Remember, he is not, like you, a pure spirit. Never having been a human, oh, that abominable advantage of the enemies, you don't realize how enslaved they are to the pressure of the ordinary. I once had a patient, a sound atheist, who used to read in the Metropolitan Library. One day, as he sat reading, I saw a train of thought in his mind beginning to go the wrong way. The enemy, of course, was at his elbow in a moment. Before I knew where I was, I saw my 20 years' work beginning to totter. If I had lost my head and begun to attempt a deference by argument, I should have been undone. But I was not such a fool. I struck instantly at the part of the man which I had best under my control and suggested that it was just about time he had some lunch. The enemy presumably made the counter-suggestion. You know how one can never quite overhear what he says to them? That this was more important than lunch. At least, I think that must have been his line, for when I said, quite, in fact, much too important to tackle at the end of a morning, the patient brightened up considerably, and by the time I had added, much better come back after lunch and go into it hard with a fresh mind, he was already halfway to the door. Once he was in the street, the battle was won. I showed him a newsboy shouting the midday paper and a number 73 bus going past, and before he reached the bottom of the steps, I had got into him an unalterable conviction that whatever odd ideas might come into a man's head when he was shut up alone with his books, a healthy dose of real life, by which he meant the bus and the newsboy, was enough to show him that all that sort of thing just couldn't be true. He knew he'd had a narrow escape, and in later years was fond of talking about that inarticulate sense for actuality which is our ultimate safeguard against the aberrations of mere logic. He is now safe in our Father's house. You begin to see the point? Thanks to processes which we set at work in him centuries ago, they find it all but impossible to believe in the unfamiliar while the familiar is before their eyes. Keep pressing home on him the ordinariness of things. Above all, do not attempt to use science, I mean the real sciences, as a defense against Christianity. They will positively encourage him to think about the realities he can't touch or see. There have been sad cases among the modern physicists. If he must dabble in science, keep him on economics and sociology. Don't let him get away from that invaluable real life. But the best of all is to let him read no science, but to give him a grand general idea that he knows it all, and that everything he happens to have picked up in casual talk and reading is the results of modern investigation. Do remember, Wormwood, you are there to fuddle him. From the way some of you young fiends talk, anyone would suppose it was our job to teach. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. Well, that's the end of chapter 1. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we read today. What does it mean to you? What stood out? And how does it apply to the world that we live in today? And please take the time to share this with someone that you think might need to hear this message. You can send them the link to this video, or you can even text your friends, youtube.com/intothewardrobe. I look forward to joining you on the next Wormwood Wednesday in 2 weeks. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe because we've got a brand new video essay coming out that you will not want to miss. I'll look forward to seeing you again next time as we take another journey into the wardrobe.